One Great Earth. My name is Dan. I appreciate you watching the stream and what I have to share today. Very interesting. First off, I'll get this out of the way. The Mexico says bird flu patient died of chronic disease, not virus. Mexico City, June 7th. Reuters. A man contracted bird flu. I think that's the first time I said it was a man or woman. Contracted bird flu in Mexico died due to chronic diseases and not the virus, Mexico's health ministry said on Friday. Earlier this week, the World Health Organization reported the first laboratory-confirmed human case of infection with H5N2 avian influenza in Mexico. In a Friday press conference in Geneva, WHO spokesman Christian Lindmeier described the man's case as a multifractional death and noted that experts were still investigating whether he was infected by someone or by contact with animals. Mexico's health ministry on Friday stressed that the 59-year-old man's death was due to chronic conditions that led to septic shock and was not attributed to the virus. These diseases were long-term and caused conditions that led to the failures of several organs, the ministry said, citing the findings by a team of experts. The man had chronic kidney disease, diabetes, and arterial hypertension over the past 14 years, according to health officials. My camera's going out, I'm sorry. The ministry added that there is no evidence of person-to-person transmission of the H5N2 virus stemming from the case. Scientists have been on alert for changes in the virus that could signaling easily among humans. So we can at least know that this person did not die directly from H5N2, H5 series virus, influenza virus. The person apparently had no farm animal contact, but influenza is airborne. You don't need to have direct hand-to-hand contact to get influenza. And animal, human to human or human to animal. No interspecies crossing to humans whenever it comes to influenza, besides the cattle. Cattle in 10 states now are testing positive for H5N1 bird flu, and their raw, unpasteurized milk will give any living creature, human, cat, dog, the maximum viral load of H5N1 influenza bird flu. Do not consume raw dairy products. Do not consume raw milk, unpasteurized milk. It is very risky right now, considering that all products would have this. The thing is, like, making any dairy product or milk out of sick cattle milk, that comes out thick, yellow, and creamy, so it can't be used in the same way as normal cream. So do they just throw it out? They don't try to use it, do they? And that would just be insane. But it's only 10 states, dozens of cattle dairy farms, and in a month or so since a bunch of cats went blind, deaf, and all sorts of things. They had a H5N1 in every organ in their body. It was just everywhere. And that was from lapping up the milk in the farm. Now cattle are hosting this virus at a far greater level than originally thought. 10 states now, all reporting H5N1. Okay, that was the bird flu update. Let's get to the viruses. Giant viruses on Greenland. Giant viruses discovered in Greenland ice sheet could reduce ice melt. Every spring when the sun rises in the Arctic after months of darkness, life returns. The polar bears pop up from their winter layers. The Arctic terns soar back from their long journey south, and the musk oxen wade north. But the animals are not the only life being reawakened by the spring sun. Algae lying dormant on the ice start blooming in spring, blackening large areas of the ice. When the ice blackens, its ability to reflect the sun diminishes, and this accelerates the melting of ice. Increasing melting exacerbates global warming. But researchers might have found a way to control the snow algae growth, and maybe in the long run reduce some of the ice from melting. Living on the ice alongside the algae, postdoc Laura Pereni from the Department of Environmental Science at Aarhus University and her colleagues have found giant viruses. Their findings are published in the journal Microbiome. She suspects that the viruses feed on the snow algae and could work as a natural control mechanism on the algae blooms. We don't know a lot about the viruses, but I think they could be useful as a way of alleviating ice melt caused by algae blooms. How specific? And isn't an algae bloom just the coral reef just letting go of the algae as well? It's like heat stroking a human and that algae just goes straight up. It gets released. How specific they are and how efficient it would be, we do not know yet, but by exploring them further, we hope to answer some of these questions, she says. Bigger than bacteria. Viruses are normally much smaller than bacteria. Regular viruses measure 20 to 200 nanometers in size, where a typical bacterium is 2 to 3 micrometers. In other words, a normal virus is around 1,000 times smaller than a bacterium. That is not the case with giant viruses, though. Giant viruses can grow to the size of 2.5 micrometers. That's a tenth of an inch. It is not tiny. I mean, these things are called giant viruses for a reason. That is bigger than most bacteria. You'd be able to squish that, like. But giant viruses are not only bigger in size. Their genome is much bigger than regular viruses. Bacteriophages, bacterial-infected viruses, have between 100,000 and 200,000 letters in their genome. Giant viruses have around 2,500,000. That's a huge jump. Never found on the ice before. Giant viruses were first discovered in 1981 when researchers found them in the ocean. These viruses specialized in infecting green algae in the sea. Later, giant viruses were found in soil on land and even in humans. But it's the first time that giant viruses have been found living on the surface ice and snow dominated by microalgae, Pereni explains. We analyzed samples from dark ice, red snow, and melting holes. In both the dark ice and red snow, we found signatures of active giant viruses, and that is the first time they found on surface ice and snow containing a high abundance of pigmented microalgae, she says. A few years ago, everyone thought this part of the world to be barren and devoid of life, but today we know that several organisms live there, including the giant viruses. There's a whole ecosystem surrounding the algae. Besides bacteria, filamentous fungi, and yeast, there are protists eating the algae, different species of fungi parasitizing them, and the giant viruses that we find. Infecting them in order to understand the biological controls acting on the algae blooms, we need to study these last 3 groups, Pereni said. Even though the viruses are giant, they can't be seen with the naked eye. Okay. Pereni hasn't even seen them with a light microscope yet, but she hopes to do so in the future. The way we discovered the viruses was by analyzing all the DNA in the samples we took. By sifting through the huge dataset looking for specific genetic marker genes, we found sequences that have high similarity to known giant viruses, she explains. To make sure that the viral DNA doesn't come from long-dead microorganisms, but from living and active viruses, the team also extracted all the mRNA from the sample. When the sequence of the DNA that form genes are activated, they are transcribed into single-stranded pieces called mRNA. These pieces work as recipes for building the proteins the viruses need. If they are present, the virus is alive. In the total mRNA sequenced from the samples, we found the same markers as in the total DNA, so we know they have been transcribed. It means the viruses are living and active on the ice. DNA and RNA in viruses. At the center of the giant viruses is a cluster of DNA. That DNA contains all genetic information or recipes needed to create proteins, the chemical compounds that are doing most of the work in the virus. But in order to use those recipes, the virus must transcribe them double-stranded DNA to single-stranded mRNA. Normal viruses can't do that. Instead, they have strands of RNA floating around in the cell waiting to be activated when the virus infects an organism and hijacks its cellular production facilities. Giant viruses can do that themselves, which makes them very different from normal viruses. Whereas DNA from dead viruses can be found in samples, mRNA is broken down much faster. mRNA is therefore an important marker of viral activity. In other words, mRNA recipes of certain proteins show that the viruses are alive and kicking. Not sure exactly how they work. Because giant viruses are a relatively new discovery, not a lot is known about them. In contrast to most other viruses, they have a lot of active genes that enable them to repair, replicate, transcribe, and translate DNA. But why that is and exactly what they use it for is not known. Which host the giant virus infect, we can't leak exactly. Some of them may be infecting protists, while others attack the snow algae. We simply can't be sure yet, Brandy says. She's working hard on discovering more about the giant viruses and has more research coming out soon. We keep studying the giant viruses to learn more about their interactions and what exactly their role is in the ecosystem. Later this year, we'll release another scientific study with some more info on giant viruses infecting a cultivated microalgae thriving on the surface ice of the Greenland ice sheet, she concludes. That is fascinating. So again, the most fascinating aspect of this at the center of the giant viruses is a cluster of DNA. That DNA contains all the genetic information or recipes needed to create proteins, the chemical compounds that are doing most of the work in the virus. But in order to use those recipes, the virus must transcribe them from double-stranded DNA to single-stranded mRNA. Normal viruses can't do that. Giant viruses can do that themselves. Huh. I will definitely pull up more on giant viruses because this is new to me as well. We can't see them. 2 to 3, I don't know, 2.5 micrometers. Okay, so that is way smaller than I was thinking. Okay, 2.5 micrometers are 0.000098 inch. Humans shifted Earth axis. This is from a Smithsonian magazine. Humans have shifted Earth's axis by pumping lots of groundwater. Removing water from the ground has led to sea level rise and caused Earth's axis to shift by about 2.6 feet between 1993 and 2010, per a new study. For decades, humans have been pumping so much water out of the ground that it has caused Earth's axis of rotation to shift, according to a new study published last week in the journal Geophysical Research Letters. As the Earth spins, its rotational poles, where the imaginary line of the axis passes through the planet's crust, naturally move a bit. Anything from ocean currents to shifting molten rocks in the mantle to the melting of glaciers caused by climate change can lead to a shift in the distribution of mass across the globe, and probably we should also add destroyed mountain ranges onto this, and coax the axis to drift. Water stored in artificial reservoirs and sea level changes and atmospheric winds can play a role as well, right? The study offers. In the 20th century, Earth's axis shifted about 4 inches per year. But global warming isn't the only human-caused factor moving the planet's poles. The new study estimates that between 1993 and 2010, the pumping of groundwater and the resulting sea level rise caused the poles to drift by about 2.6 feet. The very way the planet wobbles is impacted by our activities. It's in a way mind-boggling. Every mass moving around on the surface of the Earth can change the rotation axis. We should really be adding mountain ranges on here because, like the southeast United States, India, is mountains just being destroyed, completely destroyed, and left that way. There's not really anything you do with them, they're just dust bowls. The amount of shifting caused by removing groundwater doesn't affect the length of the day or the seasons. In the new study, the researcher used a computer model to look at the effects of different factors on the shift of the poles. When they didn't include groundwater removal in their model, their predictions did not match the level of shift that scientists have observed. But when they took into account the massive amount of pumped water, which totaled more than 2 trillion tons between 1993 and 2010, their model fit the real-world observations. From the analysis, the researchers estimate that the axis is moving 1.7 inches per year due to groundwater removal. Of the factors the study looked at, pumping groundwater was the second largest contributor to the axis drifting, behind the melting Greenland ice sheet. The paper calls attention to just how much water humans have pumped. Precise number doesn't really matter, he tells the publication. What matters is that the volume is so gigantic that it can impact the polar drift of the Earth. Groundwater removed from sites at the Earth's mid-latitudes, such as the US and India, has an outsized impact on polar drift compared with extraction at the equator or the poles. However, most of the pumping has occurred in these high-impact zones, causing the water removal to have a bigger effect on the axis, Wilson tells Science. Previous research has estimated that extracted groundwater, which eventually flows into the oceans, caused 6.24 millimeters of sea level rise between 1993 and 2010. Between 2006 and 2015, global sea levels rose about 3.6 millimeters per year, and the new research confirmed that groundwater pumping has been a major contributor. I also have some other sources of this. CNN, largely the same article. So we hear a lot about groundwater pumping. So most human activities need to cease or completely drop to a third of what is happening. Take side of the continent of California, and the amount of water is pumping and the amount of mountain ranges that are getting blasted, it is changing time as it can be perceived, light and day. And that difference between light and day could throw off birds, throw off other animals that rely on the sun, the warmth, protection, be able to see. Most animals, it's just complete darkness, unless it's light pollution from a human being. Alright, I thank you for viewing this stream. If you haven't already, please like the stream and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out immensely and keeps me motivated to continuing content. Thank you, and take care. Wait. Am I done yet? We can look at the Earth's axis, but we're talking a very fine number that is not going to be able to be visible. But to like birds that can see electromagnetic fields, probably would be affecting them. Especially sea level rise swallows up islands and other bodies in the water that birds that flock in seasons would flee winter in their own countries, their own lands, where they find themselves. Alright. Again, I thank you for watching. Please take care.